As of September 24th, Elite Lacrosse is officially over for the summer season with the conclusion of the Premier Lacrosse League playoffs and Archers LC being crowned 2023 champions. Let's not sleep on the Burlington Blaze winning the Minto Cup and the Six Nations Chiefs winning the Mann Cup up in Canada. This got us thinking about what's next to look forward to before the start of the upcoming NLL season in December. With all of the talk about the possible Olympic inclusion of lacrosse, the next most interesting event is the Women's Super Sixes event being held in Oshawa, Ontario, October 6th to 8th. In light of this event, and also to celebrate last summer's World Sixes event in Alabama, we will be doing a 6 for Sixes, 6-part blog-vlog series over the next 3 weeks, breaking down all things Sixes lacrosse, the game, the defense and transition, the offense, the science, the rules, and the future. Having studied all of the available material on the Sixes game, there have been many comparisons and assertations made as to the nature of this new hybrid form of lacrosse. The intensity and physicality of hockey, the athleticism and skill positions of football, the positioning and quick restarts of basketball. Yet there's one unique defining feature, the skill and IQ of box lacrosse. Literally just remove the boards, add the 6x6 field net, take the pads off the goalie, tone down the picks, and voila, you have Sixes lacrosse.
What's the biggest difference that you find from Sixes to the field?
Very fast-paced. No heat meter, no fan, no shooting space. I mean, it's box lacrosse. It's what we grew up playing. Yeah.
The next biggest difference is a 12-player team roster instead of the 20 players traditionally allowed per team in box lacrosse, which changes a player's work-to-rest ratio from 1:2 to 1:1, and is something that will be discussed at length in the Science of Sixes vlog next week. However, the way to play defense, the way to transition, and the way to play offense are virtually identical to box lacrosse. Two menial differences are the slightly greater allowance for cutting and shooting on the wrong side, and the other being the frequency and effectiveness of bounce shots. Missing the net on your shots for a turnover can also be of dire consequence, especially considering how big it is and how small the goalie is. At the World Games in Alabama in the summer of 2022, these differences were enough to propel Team Japan Male, powered by its raw athleticism and intelligent approach, to win a bronze medal. Team Great Britain was also able to finish 4th ahead of the perennial silver and bronze medaling Haudenosaunee Nationals, who also lost 20-16 to Japan in the round robin. Even funkier is that Team Israel beat Team Japan in overtime in the round robin, and also that Team Germany then edged out Israel in the 7th place game at the end of the tournament. Canada went on to defeat the USA to win the gold medal for both male and female, with the Australians also notably winning the bronze medal on the female side. It's worth noting that the two biggest differences between the female and male Sixes game are that they still use the traditional woman's stick, and also that they don't wear helmets in the female game.
You know, it's lacrosse. You're going to get bruised up, you're going to get hit, and you just got to take it like a champ.
You just got to keep rolling, roll with the punches.
For the purpose of this 6 for Sixes series of blogs, I will be studying primarily the male game, simply because I know it and its players more intimately. Here we have created a summary of the team stats available for the 3 traditional powerhouse teams of Canada, USA, and Haudenosaunee. These stats are considerably inflated compared to the Super Sixes tournament the year prior in 2021, in which only Canada, the US, and Haudenosaunee competed. These stat totals will be revealed in the Science of Sixes blog next week, where we will also discuss how Canada picked their team. The stats also don't say much about who scored in the big games, and more importantly, they don't say anything about who got beat for goals or how defensively responsible players were, a subject which I'll touch on in my next blog on defense and transition in Sixes. What are some of the key takeaways from these stats? Looking to the defense first, combined with save percentages of 60% for Canada, Haudenosaunee at 44, and US at 43, you can see why Canada ran away with this tournament, especially when you consider that Canada was only giving up approximately 6 goals per game versus USA at 13 and Haudenosaunee at 16. Are the Canadian numbers because of high-quality defense or poor shot selection on behalf of the opponents? I would reckon that it has a lot to do with both, to be discussed later this week. Looking next at the turnover to goal ratio, legendary North Carolina Tar Heels basketball coach Dean Smith used to strive for a ratio of 3 turnovers for every 10 assists, or 30%. As of course you have to take some risks to create high percentage shots in sports. Relative to this figure, Canada sits at roughly 4.2 turnovers for every 10 goals, USA at 4.7, and Haudenosaunee at 5.3. Next, when you factor in that Canada scored on 2 out of every 3 of its shots at 67%, whereas US was at 48 and Haudenosaunee 45, scoring on less than half of their shots, it also says something about the quality of the shots that Canada was getting. Their precision shooting, highlighted by how little they missed the net, and their patience in front, which was also highlighted by the number of fakes that they threw, all subjects that I will broach in my Sixes offense blog coming out next week. It's not surprising that the Canadians and also the Haudenosaunee are missing the net and being saved less often when you consider their box lacrosse, where they're used to shooting on smaller nets and don't get the ball handed back to them if they miss the net like in field lacrosse. Higher assist totals from these two nations also reinforces this point. I spoke with a Team Canada Sixes coach recently in preparation for this series of blogs, and one of the things that he told me was that Canada averaged 4.5 passes per goal in this tournament. Unfortunately, I don't have those totals for the other countries. In doing my research, I also took the time to break down the final game of the tournament, which was the first time the Canadians and Americans had played each other since the last game of the Super Sixes event the previous year. These charts break down some of the specifics of the offensive possessions of that game. In the game, Canada scored on 54% of their possessions, with 30% of their 23 goals coming by way of transition, i.e. breakaways, fast breaks, and late transition. Why did Canada get so many transition opportunities and the US so few? For one, field lacrosse players are not used to these types of open field, odd player scenarios, which becomes problematic when you are slow to recognize these opportunities offensively and late to recognize them defensively. Zach Currier was Team USA's biggest nightmare in this respect. The next glaring difference between Canada and the US is how many of Canada's shots came from directly in front of the net, tiptoeing the crease on what we call a crease walk up here in Canada. This speaks to how effectively they were able to get to the middle of the field for high-quality shots, often using an empty crease offensive setup, which I will break down in next week's Sixes offense blog. Conversely, the USA's most utilized shot type, and goal type for that matter, was the proverbial alley dodge, on what we call a player's wrong side up here in Canada. At first glance, it looks promising that the USA scored on 33% of their goals this way, but when you look further, you realize that 4 alley dodge attempts were saved by Canadian goaltender Brett Dobson, for an overall rate of 33% effectiveness. Considering that Canada is shooting 67%, that shot pales in comparison. The alley shot is just a comfort shot with little use in the Sixes game. The USA will need to start playing real box lacrosse, and soon, if they're ever going to be able to compete in Sixes. I can see the temptation on such a large net, but if you watch close enough, Canada was basically expecting it. How many times did Canada take that shot? 0. I studied pretty much everything out there on Sixes lacrosse before engaging in these blogs and vlogs, and I see guys breaking down the PLL Championship Series glorifying the alley shot in Sixes. All of those PLL teams in the Championship Series would have got completely obliterated by Team Canada. Some will argue that the USA split 2 games with Canada at the Super Sixes in 21. However, if you look closely, yes, they won the first game 18-17, but in the second game, Canada won convincingly 18-12. Both teams were cycling various combinations of national team hopefuls through their lineup in 2021, but when Canada puts their best transition players on the field combined with the best athletes and offensive players in the NLL, game over. Watch the Haudenosaunee play Canada and you will see exactly what I'm talking about. Pure box. It's unfortunate that the Haudenosaunee didn't get to play the Americans in Alabama because they were in opposite pools, as it would likely have been a closely contested game like they were in 2021. There is something to be said about the possibility of the USA beating them on the backs of their sheer athleticism. However, Team Haudenosaunee should have been able to routinely outsmart them with their box lacrosse skills and savvy.